welcome. My name is John, and I'm just here to discuss movies on the YT. And if you'd like to join that discussion, go ahead and smash that subscribe button and hit that notification bell as well to stay up to date on my channel. And today we are talking about Peter Jackson's King Kong. I'm continuing my monster movie review series. I've reviewed the entire Monsterverse, as well as a few other Godzilla and King Kong movies. And so check those out if you haven't yet, in preparation for Godzilla vs. Kong, which comes out this week. I'm very excited for that. More excited than I initially was at the beginning of the year. And the 2005 version of King Kong is actually pretty important to my development into becoming a movie fan. Because prior to this, I'd really only seen Pixar movies, comic book movies, and mostly just cheesy Batman movies, whether it's from the 60s or the 90s, and then live action Scooby-Doo movies. And so this was kind of my first movie that really showed me what a movie can do and can be. And so getting started in King Kong, you have Carl Denham, this film producer, film director, who gets his cast together and his crew together, travels to Skull Island to shoot a movie. His film ends up getting destroyed in the chaos of that section of the movie, and he ends up capturing King Kong, this giant ape that they found on the island, and bringing him back to New York to display him and exploit him, which inevitably ends with King Kong's tragic death. Everybody knows the King Kong story by now, even if they haven't seen the movies. And so starting off with the action in this movie, the action is really good. You have some great standout moments, like the King Kong versus V-Rex fight, which is pretty damn good of a fight. You never lose geography of the situation. And even though it's somewhat of an extended fight, the fight changes location. It goes from a fight within a woods to a fight on these vines which they're hanging on, to just a fight in an open area, which is where it obviously ends up ending if you've seen the movie, and Kong breaks the V-Rex's neck. And then you have the spider pit sequence, which is, in my opinion, is really good, and it's very much a horror action scene and sequence, but it does have one of the nitpicks that I could see people having with this movie, when Jamie Bell is shooting a spider with a machine gun and just spraying the machine gun, but the spider he's shooting is 6 inches from Adrien Brody's face, and yet none of the bullets hit Adrien Brody. They all hit the spider, and yet he's just spraying a machine gun. And even though this movie has some amazing action set pieces, it's not a movie that's focusing on making this blockbuster action movie in the same way that Skull Island is. And so, moving on to the acting. The acting here is probably the best overall acting out of any King Kong movie. You have Naomi Watts playing a great Ann Darrow. You can really feel her emotions and feel the development between her and King Kong. You have Carl Denham, played by Jack Black, in this. And even though Robert Armstrong gives a better performance in the original, in my opinion, Jack Black still does a great job, and I actually like the writing of his character in this movie. You can really see that really brings out the side of Carl Denham that is so focused on making a film. He's a guy whose livelihood requires him to capture beauty on a camera, and yet he fails to see beauty right in front of him. And I think this movie does a better job at portraying that side of Carl Denham. And then you have the character of Jack Driscoll, who is used to kind of subvert or make commentary on the traditional Hollywood hero, which is something that's kind of different from the original King Kong, whereas in that one you kind of had the traditional pretty boy Hollywood actor as the hero that saved Ann Darrow on Skull Island. Here, you have that character in Kyle Chandler, who I always forget is actually in this movie. But he ends up being a scaredy cat. He does come back, but they make, instead of having the pretty boy Hollywood actor be the one that saves the girl from the island or in the island, they make it the underappreciated screenwriter. And now the visuals. This is a stunningly shot movie. I love the cinematography in this movie. I have so many beautiful shots and beautiful moments in this movie. The sunset shot really sticks out to me. And you just have some great cinematography in here. And the CGI and motion capture work really holds up for the most part. There are a couple sequences, but for the most part, it still holds up 15 to 16 years later, in my opinion. Sure, the dinosaur stampede sequence and maybe the theater sequence when Kong breaks free in New York might be a little sketchy, but overall, they're still pretty good visual effects in this movie. And now onto the story and the writing. This is probably my favorite part of this movie, and it's the part that really separates it from the previous two versions of King Kong for me. Whereas the original, it felt like it rushed most of the story, especially the relationship between Anne and King Kong. In the 70s version, I don't think they necessarily rushed as much, but they included very cheesy dialogue and some cheesy moments, like him Kong blow drying Jessica Lange by blowing on her. In this version, you really get to see the development between Anne and Kong. You know, you have that vaudeville sequence, which calls back to kind of the opening of the movie, where she's doing these vaudeville stunts and slapstick comedy for Kong, and Kong, starts pushing her and stuff, and she gets mad at him for doing that, and you start to see this relationship build. They start there's these moments where they feel like this relationship, they have back and forth and everything, and then when you get to the sunset sequence, it's when Anne notices that Kong can actually sees and interprets beauty in the world, which contrasts with Carl Denham, who's focused extremely heavily on his movie, and that's his job, is to capture beauty, but yet he never notices that beautiful aspect of the island he's on. And so he fails to see the beauty in front of him, where King Kong tries to observe it, and when Carl Denham sees beauty, he wants to exploit it, which ends up destroying the beauty. And so I just love that contrast between King Kong and Carl Denham. And if it wasn't for us being able to see the human side of King Kong and see the heart in those moments with development with Anne Darrow, then the theater sequence when he's chained up and everything, you wouldn't have any emotion there. You'd just sit there thinking, oh, there's a poor gorilla chained up on a stage. But because you have that development in the background, and it was done so well, and it lets you breathe with it and take it in, you really get to feel for Kong in that moment. And if it wasn't for the development with Anne Darrow, then the final sequence wouldn't have any impact for when he's trying to be with Anne, the Beauty and the Beast, and be with Anne and preserve her beauty by protecting her from the airplanes and everything. As we get into the sound, this is where I'm going to highlight one of the main criticisms I hear about this movie, and that is the length and the pacing. Whereas for me, it's never been an issue. I saw this movie when I was either 7 or 8, depending on the month it was released, and I was captivated for the entire runtime, even at that young of an age. Yet my dad, who's much older and should have a much longer attention span, didn't like this movie at all. He thought it was extremely boring. And I've never felt that. And through all these rewatches, I think that's because of the sound and the score. Because at the beginning of the movie, when you're in 1930s New York, it has this kind of brisk, upbeat pace to it. And then it gradually turns into a horror score. By the time you reach the fog, it has become a horror score. And then throughout the events on Skull Island, it gradually turns into an adventure score. And then by the end of the movie, it had gradually turned into a tragedy score. And so the score never gets tiresome. It never gets this monotone, tiresome feel to it. And at the beginning of the movie, when the story's much slower, it has kind of that brisker pace to it. But it knows later on it's going to have some horror elements. But instead of drastically changing it, it kind of gradually changes throughout the acts. And so that's just one thing about this movie that I really appreciate. That being said, it's not a score I can necessarily listen to just on like Spotify or something like I can with like Tenet, for example. But it's a score that enhances the movie a lot, and that should be the purpose of a score. And so overall, I love this movie to death. I've always been a fan of it, even when I was a kid, and I've never fully understood some people's criticisms. I guess some people think it's long, then I guess that's their opinion, but I've never felt that at all with this movie, unless I'm looking at the back cover and read the length of the movie. To me, it doesn't feel that long at all. It feels more like a 2-hour movie to me. I'm going to give this movie an APAP, an as perfect as possible, because there is no such thing as a perfect movie. 5 out of 5. Thanks for watching this video. Like I said, I tend to enjoy this movie a lot more than most, but go ahead and tell me your thoughts in the comments section down below. And if you enjoyed this video, go ahead and smash that thumbs up icon, smash that subscribe button, and hit that notification bell as well to stay up to date. We've got Godzilla vs. Kong coming out this week, which I'm definitely excited for. I don't expect it to be better than this, but it still nonetheless looks like one awesome, fun-ass movie. And so stay tuned for my thoughts on Godzilla vs. Kong, and I will return next time when I see you again.